Hello and welcome to Olean Times Herald Sports View. I'm sports editor Chuck Pollock along with my sports department colleague JP Butler. A couple of interesting subjects just because of the proximity to what's going on with them. One, of course, is the incredible season enjoyed again by the Olean Oilers. And of course, coming up on Saturday night will be the 43rd annual Big 30 All-Star football game. JP, you and I both covered the Oilers throughout the season. Expectations were high, and their performance was even higher.
Yeah, I mean, we were down at their initial practice before the season started in late May, talking to Coach Bobby Bell and some of the players about what they thought they might be able to do this year. And there was a lot of optimism because of the fact that they were bringing 10 guys back from the team that won it all last year. A lot of those were key players. A pitcher like Austin Bizzle or a hitter like Bubba Howlands, who we've come to know. And so they did think at the time that they could repeat. I don't think anybody thought that they'd go into the season and just dominate the way they did, but they did feel pretty good about their chances. Well, that was in May, and then you have another 2 months where you actually have to put it together, and it actually has to come to fruition, because they've been optimistic before and then maybe went out and struggled a little bit. But as we know, they did more than just put it together. They really did just dominate from the get-go. They lost their second game of the season to fall to 1-1, and as we know, rip off 24 straight wins, which is just unheard of in baseball at any level. And a lot of the stuff along the way. They have the long win streak. They set a new NYCBL record for most wins in a season, for winning percentage. It was really, kind of never a question all along as to who the best team was in that league. It was just a matter of, okay, now are they going to punctuate it with a championship or not? And they do. And again, even in the playoffs, they kind of made it easy. They won all 4 games they played in. They won by at least 7 runs in 3 of those 4 games, I believe. They had one big blowout in there, and then in the championship game, when it looks as if maybe they might actually lose a game, they're down 3-2 in the 6th inning. Even in that game, they respond with 11 runs in the bottom of the 6th, and then all of a sudden that's a 10-run deficit, and again they just kind of. They win it, and they do it in the fashion they kind of did all year, pretty easily.
2 stats that stick out to me, and I talked to Brian O'Connell, the team owner, about this. One is the last 67 games, they won 57 times. That's an .850 winning percentage. But even more extraordinary is this year, factoring in the playoffs, they were, in effect, 44-6. Or 43-7. And so that's .860 baseball. It's extraordinary. And I've written a couple of times that they dominated so much that maybe they should move up in level of their league. The Perfect Game League being a perfect example. And a couple of readers, Times Herald readers from the Schenectady and Albany area, have written and said this would be a perfect fit. But Brian O'Connell made a good point. He said, we have no guarantee we're going to be as good next year. And he's right, partially because a Cole Peterson, a Bubba Howlands, certainly an Aaron Phillips, might just be drafted. Well, take those guys out of the mix, and maybe they don't win 39 regular season games. Right. So it's an interesting dynamic, and a league official, an NYCBL official, told me, they have dominated, and really this should serve as an inspiration to the rest of the teams in the league. Hey, these guys found a way to get good players in here. Now, granted, they're staying at St. Bonaventure. That's a pretty good deal. Granted, they're playing in probably the nicest facility in the league. But still, Bobby Bell has proven that he can get good players in here, and it should be some inspiration for the rest of the league.
Right, and I think, a lot of those teams in the league have had years where, maybe not quite like this one, where, to win 43 out of 50 games, but, Hornell has had some years where they were really the class of the league. I know those Syracuse teams have been up there in recent years. Cortland was pretty good in the regular season this year. And so, maybe these teams, get back to the point where they think, hey, we've gotten some really good players before. We've been a top team in this league before. We can do that again. I don't know what it was. That's one of the things I was wondering about this year was, the rest of that league and Olean's division in particular. Did they just have kind of a down year in maybe getting guys to come out for their team this year, or was Olean just that good? And I think one of the things that can maybe help keep Olean up at that high level as long as they're going to be in the NYCBL is the fact that they get so many Bona kids and Division I. That's an automatic sort of Division I pipeline right there, you know what I mean? And we know that the Bona kids on the team this year were a big reason for their success. So I think that can be something, and I think just the fact that Bobby Bell has the connections he has now. He played at Pitt. He had a Pitt kid or maybe two on the team this year. He's got a relationship with a guy from Florida. The University of Florida, and so they've always had a Florida kid or two on the team this year. But it just goes to show, though, that if you put in that kind of effort and develop those kind of connections, that any team in the league would probably have the ability to bring guys on. And as you said, this should maybe be motivation to, there were a couple of teams this year that didn't win again. They went 0-8, 0-9 against Olean. Maybe that is some motivation to try to raise the talent level a little bit.
You would hope that would be the case. And what's fascinating to me is no team in the league, and this is a message, no team in the league has as many Division I players on its roster as the Oilers do. And that's half of it. 13 of their 26 players are Division I players. But the other thing that comes out of this, and I think people here don't appreciate the quality of baseball played at St. Bonaventure. I mean, really, Larry Sudbrook deserves some love on this because they're playing in a very difficult league and they're the lowest financed team, and he's found a way to make it work. So from my standpoint, you realize, the record maybe doesn't tell the quality of the program. And then you take his players, put them in this sort of an environment, and they're, lack of a better word, dominating. So it's impressive what's happened in that circumstance.
Right, and that's the thing. Maybe it makes you appreciate the level a little bit more that Bona plays at. You know what I mean? Because when put up against other teams in the A10, you don't get a chance to see it. But when you put them in a league like this, you see, boy, you must actually have to be really, really good to play at that level. Right. And that sort of ties in. This is kind of coming out as we speak here, but the year-end awards they're in the middle of releasing those at this particular time. And as one might imagine, it was all Olean, and it was all Bona, actually, because Bobby Bell, for the second straight year, was named the manager of the year yesterday. Cole Peterson, the shortstop at Bona from Johnsonburg, and so we're kind of familiar with him from his time in high school. Just an amazing shortstop. Defensive Player of the Year for the second year in a row. And it's funny with him, I remember doing a story with Sudbrook 2 years ago, so right when Peterson was starting his college career, he was a freshman. And he really put it in a good way, where Sudbrook said, he's 5'10", 100 and nothing, he looks like your paper boy, he said, but man, can that kid play shortstop, and he can field, and he's got a nice arm on him too, but he might just look like your paper boy. And then this hasn't been officially announced yet, but we know that Aaron Phillips, who to me one of the more amazing things to see is the fact that this kid led the league in ERA, but also led the league in batting average. Right. That's just something you never see. And at the beginning of the year, I did a story on him because of the fact that he was up there in both categories. He keeps it going the entire year through and really just, dominates that league. That's the type of kid that's probably better than, be in that league at this point. But he's going to be named both the pitcher and player of the year. And I was talking to the director of operations yesterday about that, and I thought, well, I definitely thought he was going to get player of the year, because you can't lead the league in both sides of that and not be the player of the year. I thought maybe there was somebody else who might have started a few more games or meant a little bit more to their team pitching wise, because Olean had so much pitching. It's not like they were just depending upon him. They had five other guys that went out there every day.
Yep.
So I thought maybe there was a team that had a guy who just really they were really relying on. And the guy said back to me, well, you know, he won 6 times in 6 starts and led the league in ERA, so it's hard to get better than that.
Coming up on Saturday night, 43rd renewal of the Big 30 All-Star Charities Classic, and JP will be covering that game with me on Saturday. And normally, and I'm sure JP's doing this too, you look for a hook, something in the game that kind of stands out or gives you an inkling about which team is going to win. New York leads the series 22-18-2, so it's been very competitive over a series of 4 decades. But this year, JP, I get no feel on what this game is going to be. One of the things I note is some of the stars we've come to associate with the game and think they're really going to stand out. I don't see that kind of player this year. And so, you know, talk about not having a feel for a game and what's going to happen on Saturday night at Parkway Field in Bradford. I have no idea.
I say the same thing. You know, throughout the course of this week, we do our unit stories for each team. I do the New York offense defense, you do the Pennsylvania offense defense. And while you're doing that and sort of scanning through these guys and talking to the coaches about guys, you get an idea of, oh, well, this team, you know, really has a loaded group here, and, you know, they're probably going to win. And in a lot of years, I feel like I've gone into a game in my head saying, you know what, I think this team's definitely going to win and maybe even win easily. And that's happened in recent years where one team's blown out the other. We've seen a lot of those. You know, you go into a year, you know, 3 years ago where the Bonaventure kid from Port Allegheny's playing quarterback for Pennsylvania, and some of the players that he had on that team, both offensively and as a whole, and you think, you know, PA's probably going to win this game. And sure enough, I think they ran away with that one. 2 years ago, with New York, you had both the Morrison kid from Randolph, who was in the middle of 3 straight state championships at that point, and the Tanner John kid from Salamanca, who you look at and just looks the part of a stud quarterback, and you think New York's probably going to win. That was the year where Pennsylvania went down, scored the first touchdown, and then didn't score the rest of the game. New York rattled off like 44 straight points to win that game. This year, I don't get that feeling at all. I look at, you know, I've done New York, so I've looked at the fact that, you know, they have 2 great running backs. And Jake Jones, who was our player of the year, had 26 touchdowns last year as a senior, and Caleb Rinko from Franklinville, Ellicottville. And they have the Tommy Easton kid at quarterback from Franklinville, Ellicottville. He was the heart and soul of that team, but it's not like he was just this dominant passing quarterback. And then the other kid's from Southwestern, so we don't know a whole lot about him. And then I look on the PA side, you know, they're going to have the kids from Kane, who had a really good year, the Rollick brothers, and there were some really good teams in the AML South, as we know, but nobody that just totally stands out to the point where you say, okay, this team's probably going to run away with it.
Even now, circumstantially, if you have a loaded team, and coaches in the past have learned a strong lesson about this, well, I'm going to load up my offense. Well, because of the mandatory substitution, the circumstances dictate that you're only out there every other offensive series for your team. For instance, one holding penalty, a fumble, something might just cause you to be out there for 3 plays, and then you're not back for maybe almost a quarter. So that seems to affect how the game plays out so often, but I think it's particularly salient this year because it's just hard to get an idea on who's going to do what. I will say that we will have complete coverage of the game in Sunday's Times Herald, and I'll have a follow-up on Monday. And I'd just like to alert you that we'll be back with another edition of Times Herald Sports View next week. Have a good week.